Hello, my name is Carrie Siliberto, and I'm the CEO of the Home Builders Association of Greater Austin. I want to thank you for joining today's HBA webinar, a virtual meeting with home building industry advocate, Texas Congressman Michael McCaul. We are very lucky to have Congressman McCaul with us today. For those of you who don't know, Congressman McCaul was instrumental in getting residential construction added to the U.S. DHS CISA 2.0 guidance. And but for residential construction being specifically added to that national designation of essential critical infrastructure, nearly all residential construction had been ordered shut down, quite frankly, possibly for weeks, if not more likely for months, in the Travis County and Austin area. I want to let you know before we get started that you will have an opportunity to ask the Congressman some questions. We had a couple submitted via email already, and if you would like to submit yours via the questions box, today, you can do so. Please type those in there, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. I now have the honor of introducing Congressman Michael T. McCaul. Congressman McCaul is currently serving his 8th term, representing Texas's 10th district in the U.S. Congress. Prior to Congress, he served as Chief of Counterterrorism and National Security in the Texas U.S. Attorney's Office. He also served as Texas Deputy Attorney General and as a federal prosecutor in the Department of Justice's Public Integrity Section in Washington, D.C. A fourth-generation Texan, Congressman McCaul earned a BA in Business and History from Trinity University. He holds a JD from St. Mary's University School of Law and is a graduate of the Senior Executive Fellows Program of the School of Government at Harvard University. He is married to Linda Mays McCaul of San Antonio, and they are the proud parents of 5 children, Caroline, Jewel, and triplets, Lauren, Michael, and Avery. And it looks like the Congressman, I do know that he was speaking on the floor earlier and that they were going to be having votes calling, and so we were hoping to have him here right now. He had already let me know that they were going to have to leave a little bit early, but hopefully we can get him on the line here relatively quickly, so that he can give you an update as to what's going on, and you can get an opportunity to ask him some questions. While we're waiting for the Congressman, I can let you know as well that I learned this morning that he was just recently appointed to a new task force on China. So we're going to ask him a little bit about that, about what the roles and responsibilities will be for that. But he's definitely a congressman in demand and helping out Texans and the rest of the United States. I'm just going to...
A little bit late, a lot going on back in D.C. As y'all know, we voted on 4 different bills to deal with the COVID-19 response. We'll probably have another one, but we have appropriated quite a bit of money to keep small business alive and afloat, to keep our hospitals open, and to get more testing out there, which is critical. Right now, the one thing with respect to y'all's industry, and I appreciate all your support through the years, and Eddie Martin, is we were able to work with the Department of Homeland Security has an agency called the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency that I actually stood up into law by statute, and so I know a lot of the people over there, and we worked very hard to make sure that your industry was deemed an essential industry that's protected, which would allow your home builders to proceed. In fact, I was downtown a lot working out of my office, and I saw a lot of construction still going on down there, and it was good to see people out and about working. I think a big issue is, when can people go back to work? We've been telling the speaker that we're all essential employees as members of Congress, and we should be working too. So I'm glad we're getting back to work in some fashion. But I think it's all related to the curve being flattened, the declining cases, and I think we're seeing that right now. I predict we're going to go into this summer with a decline in COVID-19. You're going to see a lot more people going back to work. And I'll tell you, just in my travels around Austin and flying back yesterday, there are a lot more people on the road, and there are a lot more people flying than there were just a couple of weeks ago when we flew up to vote on the CARES Act. So I think that's positive. I think a lot of it's also going to depend on treatments and vaccines. We appropriate a lot of money for that. We have several treatments on the horizon I think are very promising that will be able to help calm down the fear and panic that seems to be out there. And also the vaccine has shown some promise recently, which will probably be coming out hopefully by the end of the year. You know, there have been people speculating on the economy. My view is that the fundamentals were there before the crisis. Unlike 2008, where the financial crisis was sort of self-created and imploded on itself, and I was against the bailout, which I thought rewarded malfeasance. This is very different because this is the fundamentals of the economy are strong going in. It was just an outside virus out of Wuhan, China, infecting the world and shutting everything down. So I think when we get past this, like with hurricanes, you typically see a trajectory upwards where you're going to see a rebound in the market, in the economy, in growth. I think Texas is still growing very fast. You know, there's news of Tesla possibly coming to the Austin area. We got a lot of high-tech jobs flourishing in Austin, and so and across Texas. So I'm optimistic, bullish. We'll be going into the fall with a stronger economy, and people will be getting back to work. With respect to my role on Foreign Affairs Committee, I was the Republican leader on the Foreign Affairs Committee. We are investigating China. The leader appointed me to be chairman of the China Task Force. So we've been doing a very deep dive on what happened in Wuhan, how it originated, and how we can stop it from ever happening again. Remember, this happened with the SARS virus. That was actually a pandemic. And after that, there are rules put in place to prevent a future pandemic. Unfortunately, the Chinese Communist Party didn't follow those rules, and they violated them and were not transparent. They detained doctors, silenced them, destroyed lab samples, and then would not admit that it was human-to-human transmission that was highly contagious. All this really, with respect to our efforts to contain, had we known earlier, I think it could have been stopped. But because of the lies coming out, the WHO failed in its paramount mission to warn the world of a pandemic, and now we are in the situation we are today. We will be looking a lot at supply chain. I think a lot of people didn't realize how much we are reliant and dependent on the Chinese government for medical supplies, for instance, which can cripple the nation. They control our pharmaceuticals, our PPE equipment. They also want to get off supply chain out of that region with respect to advanced semiconductor chips. Senator Corn and I are working on a bill that will include, it's right there, will be included in the task force recommendations. Will be coming out October 1st with legislative recommendations to help incentivize more manufacturing here in the United States, whether that be PPE or like in Texas, really the high-tech economy could be surging if we can provide tax incentives and investments at the federal level to incentivize these companies to pull their supply chain out of Asia and into the United States to manufacture. I think all these point in positive signs moving into the summer and fall with respect to the market and the economy. And I think Texas has always been a leader. I think the governor's done a great job balancing safety versus economic health as well, getting everybody back to work. And so, you know, I remain optimistic. I know it's a tough time. We haven't seen anything like this since 1918, the Spanish flu, which was far more devastating because we didn't have the science back then. 50 million people were impacted. I think we're going to get through this as Texans and as Americans. And we're doing everything we can humanly possible up here to make sure that we can rebound and make sure the money being appropriated is getting to the right places and down to the local levels to help this economy. So, with that, I'll yield back. I'd love to have any questions. The bells of St. Mary's that went off was actually my alarm that goes off to tell me we're voting. But with that, I'd love to take in any questions you may have.
Super. Thank you, Congressman. We do have a couple questions, and at any point in time you need to run, just let us know if you've got important business up there. So one of the questions we had is, what are you voting on this week in Congress?
Well, we're voting on a modification to the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, to allow more flexibility for local businesses like restaurants who, for whatever reason, have not been able to qualify for the PPP program. And it's primarily impacted the restaurant industry. And we think we were a bit surprised when we passed the bill that because of some of the guidelines out of Treasury and other things that it wasn't, a lot of these restaurants weren't qualifying, and that was certainly not our intent. I think restaurants have been impacted probably the most. And as you know, the governor's lifted the restraint. 50% now can enter into these public places. And we want to make sure the restaurants have that flexibility to also qualify for the Paycheck Protection Program. We also extend the period into the summer because what we found is a lot of people may have qualified for the loan, and these are forgiveness loans, so they're not paid back. But a lot of people qualified, but they didn't have the adequate time to actually spend them. So we kind of loosened up the restrictions, on that. And I think that's going to help in getting this economy rebounded. The other thing we're voting on is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act reauthorization. That's what I'm getting ready to vote on right now. That's that kind of tricky area of what's called FISA, and I, as a federal prosecutor, used to utilize it, where if there's an agent of a foreign power, you could wiretap them with a foreign intelligence wiretap. But we've obviously seen in the news a lot of abuses lately with that. And, we and the Congress have a role to restrict the executive branch when there are abuses of power. And I think we've seen that. As much as I really like the FBI and worked with them for many years, I think there have been some abuses of power that have to be checks and balances by the Congress.
Makes sense. If I could, on the PPE or the PPP, do you happen to know if C6s, 501c6s will be included this time?
That's a good question, 501c6s, because I hear that a lot. And 501c6, let me get back to you on that. I should know the answer offhand. But yeah, I've heard a lot of, can you text Thomas Rice or call him? Yeah, I'd love to get an answer to that, because that is a huge issue. I hear about that question probably more than any. So when we go to the next question, by the time I answer that one, we'll have an answer for you.
Okay, great. Another question is, how has COVID-19 changed how Congress operates?
Totally changed. It's eerie. Flying back up here, and there are like 10 people on the airplane, then you go onto the House. I just came off the House floor. We had one other bill that came out of Foreign Affairs Committee that I managed today, was on the Chinese Communist Party's persecution of the Uyghur population, which is a Muslim population. They're being persecuted based on religion, and they're thrown in like concentration camps, and they've done this to Tibetans, and they've done it to Christians. And we're basically condemning that action. But everybody's wearing masks on the floor, including the Speaker Pro Tem. We're all 6 feet away, 6 feet apart. We can't vote all at the same time. We have to go alphabetically and vote in groups. The speaker allowed for proxy voting and for proxy hearings, which really takes the members away from DC. And our concern is we just don't want that to disempower the members. We think the last bill she put on the floor was very one-sided, had no input from any members of Congress, was really thrown together between her and Chuck Schumer, really without any input from, certainly not my side of the aisle, but from their side, on either side of the aisle, without any member participation. And that's why that bill's not going to go anywhere. But I think we will be looking at another phase bill that will be bipartisan. To answer your question, they don't qualify, but there is a push to get them added to programs, either with new guidelines or this phase 4 bill that we know is going to happen because the Paycheck Protection Program is going to run out of money, and we're going to have to replenish it. When that happens, I hope we get to a point where we don't have to replenish this anymore, and businesses are afloat. But our design by doing this was to keep small business and their employees on the payroll to survive this crisis, which I'm hopeful that we're going to start seeing a sharp decline and people getting back to work, in the summer months and then going into the fall. The only question is, a lot of people ask me, well, is it going to come back in the fall? Well, history teaches us that these things they mutate. The Spanish flu did come back in the fall and the winter. It's very likely and probable that it will. It will be a different mutation of it. So we worry about the vaccine, but we are hopeful by the fall that we'll have these new treatments that I've been briefed on with the FDA that will be coming out soon. And, with the vaccine, whether it's going to be a bullseye or whether it's going to be like a seasonal vaccine like the flu remains unknown right now. But we do think that's going to give people enough confidence to get back to work. And, I'd personally like to see, our football games be attended by, our fans. And I think everybody'd love to go in the fall and go to our football games and have some normalcy back in order. But it's a big balance between, the safety of our citizens and the health of our economy. And I think it's a delicate balance. I think the governor's done a good job in that respect. And but as for me, and I know a lot of y'all, we're all ready to get back to work. And Texans are very, independent and have a good work ethic. And I think we're going to be close to that, hopefully soon.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, and I have someone in here that submitted, it wasn't a question, but just wanted to thank you and your staff so very much for making construction essential at the Department of Homeland Security. So I wanted to make sure to convey that in. Another question here while we have time. It's a little bit longer one. And of course, we don't expect you to know every detail about everything, but maybe just in general. In the last round of funding for the economic injury and disaster loans, the SBA slashed the loan limit to $150 from $2 million and limited to agriculture only. Do you know, was this the intent of the House and Senate? And are you pushing to have this increased back up to $2 million and open to all industries?
Yeah, I'm pushing it being opened up to $2 million and open to all industries. I think, was it the intent? I mean, we were concerned with the funds running out, but it was the intent from the beginning, really, to make sure all industries were provided, by this. And there was also a distressed industry provision that is hospitality and airlines. I wanted the energy industry included in that, but we've had some other provisions to help the energy industry where they do. Most of the small producers will qualify under PPP, and then the larger ones for these Main Street loans. But I think it was the intent of Congress to make sure it covered all industries. And so we're going to go back to the Secretary to make sure we can get these guidelines. And if not, we'll have to make the intent more specific in the phase 4 bill. But that was certainly our intent. And there's a major bipartisan push to do that with the next phase. Hopefully we can get it done before that, working with the secretary.
Wonderful. And they are all starting to start off with thank you, so I won't reiterate that and save our time. Next question would be, though, do you have any thoughts on how to continue to remove barriers such as EPA to continue to bring important manufacturing back to the U.S. and potentially to Texas to continue the great job creation that we've seen these past few years?
Yeah, the problem with not having the majority in the House is we can't pass that. Certainly we'd like to. The good news is the administration has rolled back so many regulations that have really burdened the economy and unharnessed the private sector and the innovation and ingenuity, which is, I always think, is the main driving force in our economy and should be, not the government. And I think the administration has unleashed some of these environmental restrictions. Going back to manufacturing, I'll go back again to China and supply chain. I mean, if anything has gotten people's attention from COVID-19, it's just how reliant we are on a nation that's actually very hostile. They're a foreign adversary nation to our interest, and yet we have 90% of our pharmaceuticals and generics, pharmaceuticals tied to them. So they could really handcuff us. We put ourselves in a very vulnerable position with that. And they actually did hoard this protective equipment in advance, knowing this thing was going to be a global pandemic, and then price gouged the market with this PPE under the guise of charitable giving. The other thing I mentioned was the manufacturing on a high tech. I think this could be a huge winner, not only in Austin but for the entire state. And it's, again, my goal. I got off the call yesterday, a Zoom call with all the top CEOs of the top high tech companies. And as you know, in Austin, in my district particularly, I have just about every high tech company in there. Samsung, Apple's in there, Intel, Applied Materials, IBM, you name it. And a lot of these are whatever phase they're in. So many of these companies are actually manufacturers of chips themselves, but they don't manufacture the high, the more sort of advanced microchip, which is manufactured in Taiwan and South Korea, which are vulnerable to the Chinese Communist Party. In addition, China has declared they're going to invest $1 trillion of investment so they can be the leader in semiconductor chips. And you know what that can mean for us long term. We have to be more competitive with China. These are national security issues. Semiconductor chips are used by our Department of Defense and our military and are very, very sensitive in nature to our national security. And we have to do everything we can to make sure that America is in the driver's seat when it comes to the manufacturing. So we're working with Taiwan. We got the TSMC plant moved to Arizona, working with Taiwan, or actually to introduce it in Arizona. We're working with South Korea. They have Samsung in my district, and we're working with them to really ramp up our manufacturing capabilities in Samsung Austin. In addition, working with Japan and the Netherlands, who are really advanced on this issue, and our allies to make sure the United States and its allies are leading the world and not the Chinese Communist Party. So I think we got a real window of opportunity here I haven't seen in a long time to be able to give really good tax incentives and also maybe through a grant program and new research and development to really help incentivize these companies, which have been incentivized to go offshore in the past because of our tax code. They go offshore to China, to have them come back into the United States as a patriot, but also as a as some leader in the economy that can manufacture here in the United States. This can provide more jobs, manufacturing jobs right here in the United States, more income, if we can just do this right. And that's the bill that Senator Cornyn and I will be introducing in the month of June. And I personally think this is one of those issues that's refreshing because it will have bipartisan support. You know, if you look at California, whether it's a speaker or a lot of the high-tech districts in Silicon, they have a lot of pressure from their industries to work together with us on this project. And my initial conversations have been very fruitful in terms of moving this thing forward in a bipartisan package. So I think that, to me, that's very exciting, maybe a silver lining out of this whole global pandemic crisis.
That is very exciting. I've been getting texts from your staff that you are being called back to the floor to do a vote. So I want to thank you so very, very much for your ongoing support of the home building industry. We really can't thank you enough for helping to save our industry from the economic ruin that others have and continue to experience during this COVID-19 crisis. So we wish you all the best, and we thank you so much.
I'm a little bit biased because I got through college tying rebar at construction sites, and then the concrete guys would come in and pour the concrete, and that work ethic certainly kept me going through college, because it was an interesting group of people I was working with, but it taught me a lot. It was character building. Yeah, I'll never forget that time in my life. It was hard work, really hard work in the Texas sun in the summers, but taught me a good lesson about hard work and the construction industry. And it kept, like I said, it kept me in college as well. But so I kind of have a little bit of a personal attachment as well to that.
Well, we appreciate it, and together we'll all get through these turbulent times and emerge even stronger. And thank you so much for your time, and thank you to our audience.
No, thank you so much for having me, and I agree 100% on your last comment. We will get through this, and be safe.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.